All right, it is 3 p.m. We will go ahead and call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Hutchinson Utilities Commission to order. First item on the agenda, declarations of any conflicts of interest by the commission.
None. I do have one conflict. Redline Systems was listed on the payables this month. I own that company, so I will be abstaining from voting on the payment of bills.
Thank you, Matt. All right, that takes us to the consent agenda, which is approving the minutes and ratification of payment of bills. Do we look for a motion and a second?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Kathy and second by Tom. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Please let the record show that Matt abstained. Takes us to item number 3, approving the financial statements.
All right, so I'll just kind of touch on a few highlights. First, on the electric division side, obviously as we've touched on over the last couple of months, and again, it'll be a continual pattern. We've talked about the cost of, purchase power and the transmission costs. You can significantly see, year to date, we're outpacing well above where we were last year. We got over $1 million worth of more costs this year than we did last year. One thing on the transmission cost for this month, we underestimated the transmission charge, so there actually is an additional just under $32,000 that should be charged of that transmission line item for May of 2026. So when we've already made that adjustment, we'll have to reverse out the forecast. So our loss for the month will be $238,955. So our forecasted peak for May, we forecasted 42.9 megawatts for the peak for the month of May, and we ended up almost 50 megawatts because we ran into some warm weather there towards the end. And the whole load zone was really high as well. So it just showed with the heat, there was more congestion and more peak and more transmission charges. So we actually did a little bit worse than what the 2026 May number is looking like when we actually put the actual transmission charges in. But again, still moving, relatively high on those. Still within the budget, but we obviously we predicted for the larger cost of power supply and transmission charges. This MRS sheet I sent out to you, just guys as a reminder, usually our cheapest rates are always in the spring and fall. And so actually May is our cheapest rate. If you go to that last column on that top table, our wholesale costs for May are $46.57 per megawatt hour. So that's the cheapest rate out of any 12 months. Consequently, June is the highest rate month moving forward. So in June, so we're actually in June now, our wholesale rate goes from $46.57 to almost $64.50. So that's a $17 cost increase for the month of June. So as we move into the June's financials, I'm forecasting that June's usage will not be as high as June's last year, because obviously we're in June right now and we've had cooler weather, right? 60s at night, so I'm forecasting our usage won't be as high. But we are getting into the highest cost month of June, so you can expect to see a power cost adjustment fairly sizable. Again, our benchmark rate for the power cost is $54, and you can see the wholesale is well above that. Transmission charges aren't going to help that because our transmission charges are significantly more expensive. The only thing that would really try to blend that down anywhere near 54 is if we had a lot of market sales, which obviously we're not going to have because the unit one's out, so that's against us. Or if we had a tremendously high usage month where we were buying a significant more off the market at cheaper prices. But again, I don't think we're not going to be in that situation. So I anticipate, this blend, this wholesale rate, that our blended cost with those things, it'll be a little bit lower than that, but I would anticipate seeing a higher power cost adjustment, not only for June, but then also July and August too. Those are our second and third largest months for wholesale costs. And then again, we're trending behind 2025 as far as sales for resales. That's going to be the trend all year. Again, we almost hit 4 million in sales last year, and that's been the peak year of sales since I've been here. So we were probably not going to hit that anyway, but now with unit one out, we're certainly not going to hit that because we just don't have that amount of megawatts in fleet to use. So, that's going to be a knock against us. A couple other things, again, we're going to keep highlighting the power cost adjustment number down there. So the average rate through the first 5 months is 6.2 cents or 0.6 of a penny roughly. So, right now we're trending as if that mechanism isn't creating a larger portion of the revenue we're collecting, but the real test will be after August, when we get through June, July, and August, where is that number gonna be? I anticipate it's gonna be ticking up, 0.8 of a penny is what I'm anticipating. So we kept that on there so you guys could watch how that mechanism is running, moving forward, so those are kind of the highlights there. Again, we're kind of trending along on the electric side. Nothing super surprising, but I think you're just gonna see more of a tough, kind of financials for the year, just with the increased power supply costs and, and having lack of generation to offset some of that as part of our bundled rates isn't gonna help the situation on the electric side. So we're kind of muddling along, and you can see a couple of those areas in red, the operating income, the net income, we'll be in the negatives all year. We're not gonna come out of it, so I'm just not forecasting that. So just so you're aware of that. Gas side is trending as is, trending a little bit better than last year at this time. Again, gas usage was up year to date. Again, was up through this month as well. So that side's trending pretty well. Everything's in the green category on that side. All of our gross margin, operating margins are really good. Again, the only one that's going to trend in the red or off of budget is the gas supply contract or cost per gas, and that was really because of January's storm. So that's going to stay above what we budgeted because we just didn't anticipate those types of prices during that storm. Otherwise, on the cost side of things are trending fairly well. We did add some additional dollars into the rate stabilization fund on the gas side. If you recall, we've talked about over time trying to get that back to that $600,000 threshold so that we have that money going into the winter of this year, because obviously you guys know we're starting to see more unpredictability in these storms and spikes in gas prices and things going on, not only overseas but domestically here with LNG competition, things of that nature. We can see quickly that the price can change in an instant based on supply and demand, and so we are adding we're just over $384,000 in that rate stabilization fund, and again our intention is to continually add over the next 6 months to get us back to around the $600,000. So should put us in a good position heading into the winter time. Otherwise, cash, we added a little bit of cash, nothing significant. We are making some larger payments this month on the project, transmission project. I just approved a couple checks today, I think for about $700,000, and 2 payments for the general contractor. So we'll start over the next couple of months. We'll be heavily probably pulling cash out to kind of finish up this project over the next 3 to 4 months. So I'd anticipate some months we'll have more cash going out than our operating cash is going to bring back in. So I'm anticipating seeing some negative cash numbers moving forward. But again, from an investment standpoint, we've got plenty of liquidity there. We've got several $1 million in the bank, and just over $9 million that's coming due this month, and we've got a lot in money markets. So we're not going to be having to sell investments short or do any of that stuff. We've got plenty of liquidity when we need to make any large payments fairly quickly. But we'll have to watch the cash balance, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the bond financing piece and just kind of where we're sitting. But otherwise, trending okay at this point on both sides. Still, from a company-wide, still in a good spot. Gross margins just under 30. We're operating incomes 3.1%, net income 4.2. And again, we're meeting all the benchmarks that we wouldn't want to make sure that we're staying, kind of on an even keel here, even with these large projects going on. So, any questions or anything you guys want to elaborate? Take a chance when you have just kind of look through this, and then the other piece I would guess I'd highlight is that green box down below. That's their forecasted increases on their 5-year plan down there, so you can see, they're forecasting an additional 4.4% each year from 2027 on, and so you can see what that would add to our already, MRS right now we're paying just under $12 million for just the wholesale cost of power, not to mention any of the generation or any of the market sales. And so if those forecasts stay in place or fairly close, you can forecast that we're going to add another $500,000 to MRS's wholesale cost every year moving forward, and that's to cover a lot of their costs are increasing, their cost of capital is increasing, the cost of maintenance and things of that nature. So that's a good thing just to look at, to keep in perspective when we look out over the 5-year forecast. Again, I'm forecasting that into our 5-year budget. It's forecasted into the cost of service study stuff, but just keep an eye on that one because that is going to continually rise as well, so.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. Questions from the commission?
I'll make a motion to approve the financial statements.
Second.
Okay, motion by Matt, second by Kathy to approve the financial statements. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4 is open forum. Do not see any guests with us today. So we'll go right into number 5, communication, and go to the divisions. And Dan.
Nothing today. As I talked about last month, our solar projects we've been doing, our 3 sites, we have 3 sites so far that are up and completed. Our 4th site will start probably next month. We have submitted for our first round of reimbursements through the state grant as well, so we should get 70% of what we laid out. We've got about 179,000 laid out so far, but we're sent in for the reimbursement of 70% of that, so we should receive that hopefully in July. And then the other payments will come. We'll see how this first round goes. That's it.
Thank you. Mike?
Nothing today.
Barry?
Well, construction season's in full swing, so we're pretty much putting services in daily, it seems like. Been working on some state permitting for some work on State Highway 15, north end and south end. State permits right now are taking about 8 to 12 weeks to get approval, so it's a lengthy process. We're doing annual maintenance on our regulator stations. We did fly the transmission line, the airplane for the spring. We do it every spring and every fall. No issues found, everything looks good on there, so that was good. Working with Angie to get our 2 new hires, paperwork done and testing done, and we're hoping for a July 14th start date for both of them. The last thing I'd mention is we have started our leak surveys, which means we have our guys are walking all the distribution lines in town. We have 109 miles of underground pipe in Hutchinson and Brownton. We walk a quarter of it every year, so it's about 28 miles. So far, I've already gotten 2 phone calls from residents and 1 police call on our guys walking in those yards checking for leaks. So just want to make people aware that we are out there. We're doing it for your safety. We're checking for leaks, checking for corrosion, that kind of stuff. We're required to do it, and it's good for your property. And we understand the concern. I appreciate the phone calls, but just know we're out there doing it. And we started last week, and we'll be doing it all summer, so. Typically, we're wearing our Hutch utility stuff if we can, usually an orange shirt, but you might not always see the truck, because sometimes they'll walk a mile or a half mile and just keep walking. So just want to point that out to everybody here and residents, if you're hearing that we're walking in people's backyards, that's the reason why. So,
Okay, good to know.
that's it.
Thank you. Human Resources, Angie?
Just to piggyback on Byron, we're working on the welder service person position, getting that finalized, and then continuing to work on the compensation study.
Okay, thank you. Anything from legal?
Not really a legal thing, but just to follow up on Dave's comments about the solar reimbursement. The city has already received some of their reimbursement. At least that's what Mike Stifter said at the council meeting last night, so should be coming.
Good. Good to know. Thank you. All right, back to you, Jeremy.
Cost of service study is going well. Jared and I met with Dan 2 weeks ago, and they've got all the information they need. So they're just kind of wrapping up the preliminary numbers. They're hoping to get us kind of the preliminary reports to take a look at, walk through here sometime really part of July. So he appreciated the 5-year forecasting and things. He said we're way better at than most of their clients, and so they also do a 5-year forecast based on the parameters, and our numbers come out really close to their numbers, and so it just speeds up his process of doing the analytics and the review. So hopefully to see something here early part of July. We'll go through and see how everything's looking, and then we'll look to bring something forward to you guys for review and take a look at that stuff. Just kind of met with a couple of the Fagan and HDR and the cooling piping project, so we think we've got a general game plan there. We still got to work through some logistics and some things in the background, but we came out and had a conversation. I know Fagan's on site these next 2 days to really take a look at the scope of the project and really what would be done. And of course, there'll need to be some coordination when that project takes off and gets redone. make sure that we're not running into any issues with, you know, the transmission line, switch outs and things of that nature at the substation. But just to let you know, there's a process moving forward, and at this point, everyone seems like there's willing parties to try to rectify the situation, and we'll kind of see where that ultimately goes. But we met on that, discussed that a little bit, and then, and like Angie mentioned, we had met with Thomas on the compensation study, and they're moving fairly quickly on that stuff too. So I guess we're gonna hear something back, some preliminary information in the next couple of weeks, maybe a month-ish on that. So that stuff's going on, and then next week I'll be out at the APPA conference for the week, so if you need to get hold of me, just feel free to text me or shoot me an email or whatever. I'll be in and out of conference meetings and some seminar stuff, but I'll be out of the office next week, so working on that. Those are kind of the big things going on right now, so.
All right, thank you. All right, takes us to item number 6, policies. A few for review, nothing to approve for changes. And item 7, we do not have any unfinished business. So item 8A for new business, we have approved the rescheduling of the July 29th meeting to Wednesday, July 22nd.
Motion to move the meeting to July 22nd.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Tom, second by Matt to move the July meeting to the 22nd. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And our last item on the agenda, 8B, is the update and discussion on bond financing.
So I've been talking with Andy Reed over the last couple of days, just on where the process is on financing with those guys. So he revised their estimates. They're looking at about $5.8 million in bonding this year, and so that will leave about 4.2 left for us. They'd really like to stay below the $10 million threshold, so we're not incurring the additional financing charges to do that, which is fine. I think we have some flexibility to do that. And so I really wanted to run it by you guys, because I think at the end of the day, we're gonna be in a good cash position, whether we bond $5 million, $4 million, $3 million. It's just that we may have a temporary time frame where we're gonna be below the reserves. And so you guys would need to be comfortable with that at year end, if we're $1 million off or under our reserves, if we can get above that next year, either through bond financing or just through our operations. Again, the gas debt's gonna be paid off, so that's gonna be a couple $1 million that we won't have outlaying. That'll really be the biggest hiccup piece. So their general timeline is he's anticipating going to the council for preliminary approval offering July 14th. And then he would like to do the bond sale on August 11th, which means bond proceeds would come in the end of August, early September. They typically are a little bit later, but they're running through a lot of cash really quickly too with some of these projects, and so he would just rather do the bond issuance sooner than later so that they can replenish cash, so they're not having to dip into investments and things, because they kind of push stuff out and don't quite have the liquidity I don't think we do right now. So so that's kind of where they're at on that piece, but I wanted to run it by you guys. I said I would talk with you guys this afternoon about it, because that would be the biggest sticking point, is if you weren't comfortable with it, then I'd need to let him know, hey, we really want to bond more, and we end up going over the cap. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there for some conversation. Boy, it's my best estimate. We've got a lot of things in the ball. I've been forecasting out the rest of the year, but there's a lot of just big items that are in play that are hard to predict. We've got the Hitachi transformer. We're hoping to come forward with a contract in July, but based on payments on that, we could spend anywhere from $540,000 to $1.3 million, depending on how fast they meet some of those benchmarks. So that's a wild card there. We're still waiting on the Unit 1. I think most of that will be pushed into 2027, because I don't think we're going to have any real cash outlay on that side. I'm anticipating about $5 million left on the substation project to complete that this year. So the bond proceeds would cover most of probably that project, with some left to go. And then really the wild card would be just the operating cash. Are we going to come out based on my forecast? Are we going to be behind? I did kind of pare back the operating positive cash balance because of the Unit 1 is out, so I have pared that back. So that would be the kind of the last wild card piece, is how well are we going to do operating wise? If we have a couple good months in the summer, that will help. But the next 4 months, we're going to see large outlays of cash. So I'm guessing if we issued $4 million, because we're going to have issuance costs in there so far, par value of the bonds are around $4 million. We may be $1 million to $2 million either below our reserves until early part of next year, and so you guys would have to be comfortable with it. I know you don't wanna go below the reserves, but that would be the sticking point. We'd still be okay from a cash standpoint and just be below the reserves temporarily.
So what's your best guess on how long it would take us to replenish the cash?
I would for sure by the end of 27, without bonding, I would say we'd be back above the reserves by mid-year to the end of the year. The biggest piece that would help us would be, we want to have the debt service payment later in the year, which is $2.2 million. And again, depending on how the winter and the summer go, those are the tickers that, so we might fall below it a little bit. And part of it would be if we're gonna, how fast do we want to slow down CapEx stuff? If we want to slow that down and get back above reserves before we move forward with some things, we could certainly do that. But, so that will play into it too, is how quickly we want to implement capital. So we could do some bonding this year, and it sounds like they're only gonna issue probably $2.5 to $3 million next year, so there's way more ceiling next year. The timing of us bonding this year, with their larger than normal, kind of creates a constraint for both of us on that. And then we would anticipate on that schedule, we would probably have, I'm guessing, somewhere between July 14th and August 11th, probably like the 27th or somewhere in there, there would be the bond rating call. We'd have to answer all the bond questions. And then we kind of parlay our bond issuance. If we parlay with those guys, it would be easier for the council, from the council's perspective, because they're seeing it at one time versus having to come back to do cities and come back to do ours, because ours are going to be special revenue bonds and theirs are going to be geo-backed bonds, and so it'd just be efficient, and we could actually use the proceeds quicker than, sooner than later as well, just like them. So I think it makes sense to just do it concurrently with them. But you'd have to be okay with that. And then what we can do is reassess it at the end of the year, 12/31. We can see what our cash balance is with the bond proceeds and what our reserves are, and if we wanted it, we could issue bonds earlier too in the year if you guys weren't comfortable, and say, hey, we still want to issue a couple $1 million worth of bonds. Next year we can do that. We just have some additional issuance costs to do that. So.
Well, I don't have a problem with it. I from what I can tell, either time or a combination of time and another issuance in 27 solves a very short-term problem. So the benefit and the fact that the city would like us to stay under the 10, I think it makes sense. So we always have the ability to reassess and go back at it. And it sounds like there's more flexibility with the total issuance we could have next year if we needed it.
Yeah, definitely. There'll be more ceiling for us to add more if we want to. Again, we're going to have probably from this end of this project, we're going to have a low allow for a few years in there on this Wilmer project. We'll have to pay for the Hitachi transformer, portions of it along the way, but some of the other large costs are going to be, staggered out 28, 29. So we're going to have a gap of a year and a half, 2 years in there where, I think we'll be in a better operating cash position because we have the lack of debt service on the gas side. So.
Okay. Thoughts from anybody else?
I'm
Makes
very
sense.
ways.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, I'll
Go down
proceed
that
with
road.
that then. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other input from the commission?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Very happy motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Is that too long for you, Tom, or?